International Olympic Committee has just announced the next city chosen to host the 2032 Summer Olympics will be Brisbane. Brisbane will, of course, be the third Australian city to host the Games. Melbourne first had it in 1956. Then Sydney played host in 2000. Well, for more on this, we can cross now to Andy Richardson, who joins us now from inside the Tokyo 2020 Media Centre. Andy, it looks like the show must go on despite all the recent difficulties, and it's Brisbane's turn for the spotlight.
Well, nothing ever happens involving the Olympics without an element of controversy. Normally on these occasions when we're looking at a future Olympics, there's a number of bidding cities. They have their final presentation on a day like this and then a vote is made. That hasn't happened this time around. There's been a complete transformation in the way these 2032 Games are distributed. Back in February, it was announced that Brisbane was the preferred bidder for the IOC, and that meant that other interested cities and nations, including Qatar, Indonesia, India, there are also bids percolating in Spain and in Germany, were asked to sit on the sidelines while the IOC discussed with Brisbane how viable their bid was, how sustainable it was, and how cost efficient it could be, because in their eyes, those are now the key things heading into an Olympic Games, to try and use existing venues and only to use venues that aren't going to cost huge amounts of money to the host nation. Now, some arguments about a conflict of interest here. Thomas Back, the man he put in charge of setting up what's described as the Future Host Commission, is John Coates, who is by chance an Australian, one of his closest allies, a vice president within the IOC, a man who was behind organising the Sydney 2000 Games, and the man in charge of that host commission being an Australian. And funnily enough, here we are with a host city from Australia. So some criticism about the transparency in this process, and really a huge challenge ahead for Brisbane to make sure that these games do stay sustainable and economically viable. Since 1976 in the Games in Montreal, on average, host cities go over budget by no less than 213%. So a huge challenge ahead for Brisbane.
A huge challenge ahead for Brisbane, and arguably a huge challenge ahead for Tokyo as well. But more on that on the days and weeks to come. For now, Andy Richardson in Tokyo. Thank you very much indeed.